The rain has been coming down for 9 days and it is not going to stop. You are in the forest because the forest is the only place left that is yours, and the forest is now a swamp. Everything you own is wet. Your boots are wet. Your blanket is wet. The wood is too wet to burn. And a wet man in a cold forest is a dead man on a slow clock. A tarp does not save you. A lean-to does not save you. The rain blows sideways and the ground beneath you turns to mud and the cold creeps up through your spine. You need to go where the rain cannot follow. You need to go into the ground and you need to do it so that the ground stays dry. This sounds insane. Digging a hole in a forest that is actively flooding sounds like digging your own grave. But the partisans who fought in these forests learned to do exactly that, and to do it with essentially one tool, and to stay dry through weeks of rain that rotted everything above the surface. Tonight, you are going to learn how water actually behaves, and how to use a few feet of dirt and a couple of trenches to beat a storm that beats everyone else. Part 1. Across the occupied territories of the Eastern Front in the Second World War, hundreds of thousands of partisans and refugees lived in the forests for months and years, hiding from forces that would kill them on sight. They could not build cabins, because a cabin is visible and a cabin burns. What they built instead was the zemlyanka, the earth-dugout, a half-buried shelter roofed with poles and bark and earth dug into a hillside or sunk into the forest floor, warm in deep winter and dry in endless rain. Whole families lived in them. Field hospitals operated in them. They were dug very often, with little more than one entrenching tool and bare hands, by people who had nothing else and could not afford to be wrong about the weather. To build one that stays dry, you have to understand the single iron law that governs everything. Water always flows downhill, and it will always take the easiest path. Water is not your enemy because it is wet. Water is your enemy because it pools, and pooled water against earth soaks through. And soaked earth conducts your heat away and rots everything you own. So you do not try to stop the water, which is hopeless. You redirect it. You give it an easier path than the one that runs through your shelter, and water, being lazy and obedient to gravity, takes the easier path every single time. The first principle is grade siting. Where you dig matters more than how you roof. You never dig in a low spot, a hollow, the bottom of a draw or flat ground where water has nowhere to go, because that is where every drop in the surrounding forest eventually collects and you will wake up in a pond. You dig into a slope, partway up a well-drained hillside, where the natural grade carries water past you and away. The ideal partisan dugout was cut into the side of a rise so that 3 sides were earth, and the downhill side was the low entrance, with the whole structure tilted so that any water that did get in ran straight back out the door under gravity, rather than pooling in the back. The second principle is the drainage trench, and this is the heart of the whole system. Around the uphill side of the dugout, you cut a diversion trench, a channel that intercepts the sheet of water running down the slope before it ever reaches your roof and walls and leads it around both sides and away downhill. It is a moat whose only job is to catch the flow and send it elsewhere. Below the shelter, you cut an outflow so that water entering the entrance keeps moving out and down, never standing. These trenches are not decoration. They are the difference between a dry chamber and a clay bathtub. The water never gets the chance to pull against your earth, because you have given it a faster road around. The third principle is the layered shedding roof, and the order of the layers is everything. On top of the dug chamber you lay a frame of poles, close together, spanning the span, your structure. Over the poles, you lay a shedding layer, bark slabs, preferably birch or spruce bark laid like shingles, overlapping downhill so each piece sheds onto the one below, or thick mats of evergreen boughs layered the same way, butts up, tips down, so water runs off rather than through. Only then, over that watertight shedding skin, do you pile the earth, the spoil you dug out of the chamber, mounded and crowned so it sheds to the sides, rather than holding a puddle on top. The earth is your insulation and your camouflage, and your weight, the bark is your raincoat, the poles are your bones. Get the order wrong, earth straight on poles with no shedding layer, and the dirt turns to mud and drips on you for a week. Get it right, and a foot of crowned earth over overlapped bark sheds rain like a tin roof and holds your warmth like a blanket. The fourth principle is to get up off the floor. Even a perfectly drained dugout has a floor that is cool and can weep moisture. So you build a raised sleeping platform, poles laid on low crosspieces, lofted several inches above the floor with boughs on top. You sleep dry and warm above the cold, damp earth, while any stray water runs harmlessly beneath you and out the door. Dry above, draining below. That is the whole secret, and it is nothing but a correct understanding of which way water rolls. Part 2. Now dig. And yes, with one tool. An entrenching tool or a sturdy fixed blade in your hands will do, because the partisans had no more than that. Site selection first, and do not rush it, because a bad site cannot be fixed by good building. Find a well-drained slope, sandy or gravelly soil if you can, never heavy clay bottom land or a hollow. Read the ground for where water already runs, and put yourself off to the side of it, not in it. Get under a thick conifer canopy if possible, for extra rain cover and concealment. Cut into the uphill face of the rise so most of your chamber is earth-walled and the entrance faces downhill. Now the sequence in this order, because the order is the difference between dry and drowned. First, before you dig the chamber, cut your uphill diversion trench, a channel a foot or so deep, curving around the uphill side, and leading the slope water around both flanks and away below you. Do this first so that if it rains while you work, the water is already being sent around. Second, dig the chamber into the slope roughly 2 feet deep to start, and as long and wide as you need to lie down and sit up at the high end, throwing the spoil up onto the downhill rim where you will use it later as roof earth. Keep the floor tilted very slightly toward the entrance so any water self-drains. A practical size for one person is about your height + a foot long, 3 to 4 feet wide, deep enough at the high end to sit sloping to a low crawl entrance. Third, build the roof bones. Lay your pole frame close packed across the chamber, resting on the earth banks and on a stout ridge pole if you span the long way. Fourth, lay the shedding skin, overlapping bark or layered boughs, starting at the low edge and working up so each course laps over the one below, like shingles, tips and slabs always pointing downhill. Fifth, pile and crown the earth, the spoil from your digging, over the shedding layer, mounding it so it sheds to the sides and never holds a puddle a foot or so deep for warmth. Sixth, cut the outflow below the entrance so water leaves and keeps leaving. Last, build the raised bed inside and hang or prop a bow door over the small entrance to hold heat. Now the mistakes that kill. The deadliest is bad siting, digging low, in a hollow or flat ground, or right in a drainage line, so that you build a perfect roof over a chamber that fills from below. No roof fix is a hole dug in a sump. The second is skipping the diversion trench, trusting the roof alone, and letting the whole hillside's water sheet straight into your walls. The third is the wrong roof order, earth straight onto poles with no shedding layer, which gives you a mud shower instead of a dry chamber. The fourth is collapse. Do not dig wider than your poles can safely span. Do not undercut unsupported earth, especially in loose or saturated soil that can slump and bury you. Keep the span modest and the poles stout. The fifth is fire and air. A dugout is a confined space, and any stove or fire inside produces carbon monoxide that is invisible and lethal in an enclosed earth chamber. So any fire demands a deliberate vent and a smoke channel, and if you are not certain you have ventilation, you do not light a fire inside. You stay warm by insulation and dry clothing instead, and never forget that a buried shelter in saturated ground can flood fast in a cloudburst. So keep your gear ready to grab, and never trap yourself with a single blocked exit. There is something the partisans understood that ran deeper than drainage trenches, and it is this. When the world above the surface turns against you, when the rain will not stop and the enemy owns the roads, and there is no comfortable answer anywhere, the move is not to fight the storm on its terms. The move is to go where it cannot follow, to accept the discomfort of the dark and the dirt and the digging, and to win by understanding the simple unbreakable rules that the storm itself obeys. Water rolls downhill. Heat rises and earth holds it. The man who knows these things and is willing to dig can be dry and warm 3 feet under a forest that is killing everyone who stayed on the surface. So do not curse the rain. The rain does not care, and cursing burns energy you need. Read the slope, cut the trench, lay the bark, crown the earth, and go into the ground the way desperate people have gone into the ground for as long as there have been storms and enemies. A few feet of dirt and a correct idea about which way water flows will keep you alive through weeks of weather that breaks the unprepared. The earth is not your grave unless you sight it like one. Dug right, it is the driest, warmest, safest place in the whole drowning forest. This has been Apocalypse Solutions. Dig smart, stay dry, stay alive.